I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are now on to item 2, approval of tonight's agenda. Seeing no public comment here, if there's any virtual public comment, please use the raise hand feature now. All right, board, is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. We are now on to item 3, comments from the board and superintendent. We'll start with Nancy, and then Isabel, do you want to go last to get yourself ready? Okay, so we'll go Nancy and then Jeff down the line, and then we'll finish up with Isabel.
So my activities since our last meeting have involved work with the local planning council, the legislative action committee with the Santa Clara County School Boards Association, Walking College, fellow activities, and a very exciting activity, a webinar that I did this afternoon about leading local planning. It was foresight training by Stanford's Institute of the Future, and I will be getting the training materials so that perhaps at a future board development meeting, we can go through learning about how to do future thinking and look at challenges that we're seeing right now and project how things might look in the future. I think it was a really good exercise, and I'm excited to think about looking for the future, but thinking and planning and leading direction for our system. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have no comments.
I sent my comments in to the board, but I didn't put on there. I went to the ELAC meeting at CMS last night. Seems like a long time ago. And one of the things that they were doing there was the families were they coordinated so that the families were double bagging the bags for Second Harvest Food Bank and the groceries, and then they were going to get the leadership kids involved in doing that. And they're just so focused on participating and giving back to the community and feeling supported themselves. And then they also kind of showcased just off the library a new room that's a wellness, like sort of family support area. So you can go in there and fill out applications for things, and they have an area for the kids, and parents can fill out job applications. So it's like a community room within the library just for families. So that was really exciting to see. So that's all I have to report. Everything else is in.
Thanks. I just wanted to highlight a webinar that I watched. I don't know when it was now, because I watched different one. But the one I really liked it was about tutoring, but they used the phrase high impact tutoring. It's a lot of them about high quality, but I just liked that. I mean, high quality is always important too, but I really liked that phrase of high impact. Isabel heard me say it this morning. It's like my new phrase now is like high impact. I liked that. And it's part of a series that is really fantastic by what's Wested, thank you. I was like West something. And then the other thing is I was able to go visit Bishop this morning, and Isabel joined. And it was so great to be in the classrooms with the kids, right? Like I haven't been in the classroom because I can't go in my own kids' classrooms, right? And then with COVID and stuff. And so it was just great to be in the classroom, but I definitely missed, like I wanted to go down next to them and like ask them what they're doing and help them. I'm like, oh, I can't wait till I get to start doing that again. But it was really great to go visit and be there and kind of hear about how things are going at their school. And that's all I have. Okay.
Well, let's see, since last meeting, there was the steering committee and the master planning committee, so we were still reviewing the major directives of the future buildings and the future master plan as being going very quickly. And we have, well, still there's still a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of communication with the sites and a lot of feedback from each of the sites and the community and schools and their plans. For that, we did have the State of the City, I think, since that time, where we received that award from the city. It's a district for all the work done. There was also the training about budgeting that we worked, Bridget and I went last week.
Schools for sound finance.
Yes, which we learned a lot about how it's gonna work the new budgeting from the schools to have food and free meals, and how that comes down from federal, state, and how we can reuse as much as we can for the children in our city. Then, of course, we have some site visits, some school visits. It was very good to see how everything is working at Bishop. One of the things that I noticed is that while in some sites they are still overwhelmed, they're still trying to move forward, and they're still dealing with a lot of challenges, is very different in Bishop. They told us that the morale is great. The teachers are coming with a lot of energy, they are laughing, they are so excited. So it was nice to see a little bit of change of pace in that way. Then there was also the VLAC meeting here at the district 2 days ago, and it was very well received. A lot of people from different schools. One of the people from each school came and told us about the English learners and their communities, and then we set up a big plan to learn more about the needs all around, how different are the needs in different parts and in different sides of the cities. And we are next time we're gonna hear a lot about what are the priorities of the actual families, and what are the priorities of each of the learners all around the city. And well, I think those are some of the highlights of the different things that been happening around.
Thank you. Dr. Gallagher.
Yes, so we'll start off with COVID. And so we're continuing to have experience low incidence of COVID, even as our testing is increasing. So that's really good news. It seems that the vaccinations for 5 to 11-year-olds will be, seems like early November. So just a couple weeks away. Which means like we've got to bridge to there, and that's, as we're having rainy weather and kids are more inside, our principals are working on ways to make sure, because lunchtime is a challenge. So we're working on that. The indications I'm getting from the meetings that I go to is that the state won't be looking at relaxing any kind of rules that are coming from them, probably until February, March timeframe. Which makes sense. They want to get us through the holidays, get us through the vaccination for the younger kids. But there's optimism, which is really good. So that's the update on that. Oh, and we completed our survey of staff vaccinations. And we're, it's funny that the number was consistent throughout the survey. So we're just over 95%. And we have good infrastructure in place for the testing of those who have not been vaccinated or who declined to stay. So we're in good shape there. And I really believe that, I think as we all do, that is why we're having low incidence, not just our teachers or our employees, but just our county and our community. The high vaccination rates is really the key to our success in keeping kids safe in school. Also wanted to mention that I had my first superintendent's advisory committee of parents. It was a small but mighty group of 7 parents, but they were from 7 different schools. I think 8 different schools were represented, so that was good. And very vocal, diverse group of parents. And what we're going to do is we have November 16th picked out for the next one, and we're going to survey parents to see like what time of the day will work best for your schedule. And we'll just keep adjusting until we can get the best turnout. And then finally, Isabel mentioned the facilities master plan next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. We have town halls. The Tuesday meeting is in person at Bishop Elementary School. You need to register in advance, right?
Yes.
You're a grant. So call the school district and we can get you through that. We just need to know who's there, and we're going to have it in the auditorium at 50% capacity. Of course, everyone has to be announced. And then the second one is a Zoom meeting. So we're doing both ways. So we want to get maximum community input into facilities master plan. So that's my update.
Thank you. We are now on to item 4, comments from the Sunnyvale Education Association. Are not seeing any in person. Is there someone from that organization wishing to speak?
Sunny said it's here, but she has raised her hand.
Okay, we'll just give a couple of seconds just in case. Okay, we're on to item 5, comments from the California School Employees Association. And again, no one in person. We'll give it just a moment if there's an official representative who wishes to speak. All right, and then we are on to item 6, comments from the public. This would be, there's nobody in person, so if there's anybody virtually who wishes to speak, as a reminder, this is for items not on the agenda. There will be time for agendized items later on. Are we getting any?
We didn't call him right.
Oh, raise, so anyone who wishes to speak, sorry, I didn't finish that thought. Please use the raise hand feature. I was jumping ahead, sorry.
Thank you.
When I'm trying to talk slow, my brain's going fast, and then the slow, it doesn't always connect. I'm not seeing any, okay. We are on to item 7, presentations. And we have one presentation tonight, so 7A is the report on Sunnyvale School District's Child Nutrition Program. And am I turning it over, Martha? All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher, members of the board, and thank you, Lori, for your ongoing support. I think you guys have had an opportunity to review this, so I think we'll go through it. Please feel free to stop anytime. I did want to introduce myself for those. I think I know most of you. I'm Martha O'Rourke. I'm a district manager for this area, for the Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, pretty much. And I do go down into the Central Valley a little bit, but I pretty much am just in these 2 counties and in this area. But I also want to introduce that your local team. This is Jeff Larry. He's new here. I'm sure some people are seeing him around. And then Armando, I think you all know Armando. Everybody knows Armando. So thank you for everything they do here locally. And I'm sure that if we have questions, they can also help answer them. So we'll get started. I'm hoping to keep this pretty, where am I pointing? Oh. Oh, I have to get the light.
Right, there it goes.
There it went. Okay, just a quick agenda, real fast on this last year with the curbside, just a couple quick slides on that. And we'll talk about this year. And then I went ahead and put an appendix of things in there instead of kind of, I don't want to say boring you, but giving some more detail, that if you want more detail, you can certainly use it as a reference. And feel free if you want any more detail. I am a person with a lot of detail, so I can give you as much as you guys would like. So anyway, we'll move from there. Oh, thank you. This isn't working. Basically, one of the things I think all of us in this room have to really commend the food service staff for last year. Every week things were changing in child nutrition, every week. And so you have to be very flexible, going to curbside, how do you account for meals? Because we're coming from a very highly regulatory environment in child nutrition. All of us in this room are like, it's just lunch, it's breakfast, but it's really highly regulated because you're depending on federal funds. And anytime you depend on state funds, anytime you depend on those, there's always rules attached. So I'm sure you see that in every other department too. So last year, you basically did 209,000 breakfasts, 212,000 lunches. Basically, that was 1,161 breakfasts and 1,171 lunches. You did 912 suppers a day, and you served 990 snacks a day. So you served a lot of kids last year, and most of it was all in meals in kits that they prepared at home, because we didn't really have kids sitting, they weren't allowed to stay on campus and eat. And there was no, it's called congregate feeding. There was no congregate feeding allowed. And that was across mostly all California and most of the other states, but some states went back to school earlier than we did in California. Your end results, what really helped your program was supper. What they did with the supper program is they really relaxed those regulations and allowed you to do supper at all your sites for the kids enrolled in school. And in a normal year, you could only do it where you're over 50% free and reduced. Your area eligible. You're restricted to just areas of community that have the higher need. So that was restricted. That was loosened the restrictions on that. And I'll just keep going if you guys have questions. Next slide. This is just a kind of I always want to mention how decisions are made in school districts. It's not a Sodexo program. It's your program. And so basically our job is we try to get goals. I know I was talking to Armando and Larry earlier today, and you're already setting up your coffee hour or whatever with the principals, with the parent groups and things to start asking with these programs. We've been a little bit delayed in a lot of stuff just because of the supply chain issues. You know, you can all want this, but if they can't get it to us. But I think it's settling down. Still a lot of, particularly paper products, a lot of that sitting in containers because we don't do a lot of manufacturing of paper in the United States now. And so the trickle down is it's sitting in LA, I guess, in containers from China. So anyway, that's kind of the problem because they still want some packaged items. But food, and then the other thing that happened during COVID, over 18 months, a lot of people that were manufacturers for the child nutrition, they stopped producing food. And what they discovered was it might not have been an industry they wanted to be in some of the food manufacturers, particularly in the meat industry, because it's very low margin for them. And they discovered that it really wasn't beneficial for them. So they've pulled out of this market. And anytime you do that, there's going to, in our economy, there'll be other ones that'll come into that market, but it takes time. So, those are some of the issues. So what Sodexo does, you set your goals, whatever those goals are. I always say we can do caviar if you'd like to. Our job next is to quantify it for you and let you guys know what those financial implications, if it costs money, if it doesn't, what the kids, if they're going to eat it, all the things about that, and also to make sure you're under regulatory compliance. And then the district decides what they want to do. And this is kind of, actually not just a row, it's a circle that is always going on. Things are always changing. And I have to say, we're really changing right now as California moves to a universal feeding program for all students. So this year, you're under what's called, in 2021, it's seamless summer is what you're calling it all year long for the funding piece. I want to first welcome Chef Larry, and I included his bio in the packet, but he's here to focus this year on site training, to teaching people how to cook on site more, do more things more efficiently, especially now that you're feeding more kids every day. You may, with more meals you serve, you have to be more efficient, just like if you have a bigger dinner party at home. You have to get this planned out better. So recipe modifications to meet the students' local needs. We have a very diverse community, and so we're trying different things that can meet the different groups of people. We want to incorporate and have for years the minimally processed local ingredients when affordable on supply chain. Pilot new menu items specifically at schools this year that they're working on. We want to get back to the taste testing. That's somewhat delayed because in your district we've relied on the volunteer 5210 group. And volunteers, that's been postponed for a couple months because of volunteers on campus and COVID. So as soon as that's lifted, we're there. And he's also working on just the overall, gosh, the cafeteria sat empty for a couple of years. Signage kind of falls off walls, things are meant to be used. So they're kind of giving it a refresher there. So, and this number is changing every minute. So more students are choosing school lunch right now, and I would think it's probably because it's totally free for everybody. There is no cash transaction going on. So your meal counts are going up every day. USDA is allowing a free breakfast and a lunch to all students this year. So every student who wants one gets one. We're serving more meals than 2019, which is good, 17% up. And then meal counts per day are up about 98 breakfasts and 475 lunches. But that's higher. Even last week, the meals went up even higher than that. I think it's people getting used to it. And quite honestly, there's some fatigue in families making sack lunches that happens a little bit into the school year. So another graph just on the meal counts. The one thing is here is, and I don't need to tell you guys, your enrollment's declining. And so as a percentage, you'll be up, but as a true number of meals, which is what you count your revenue on, you could possibly almost be somewhat flat to a little bit up, but not as much. If the enrollment stayed the same and we grew 17%, you'd have a lot more meals, but you're not the only ones declining in enrollment. So everybody is. So at least everybody I work with is. The one thing I want to, and I'm prefacing this a little bit, is on the reimbursement rates. This year they realized there would be supply chain issues, shortages. So the federal government is funding you at the highest rate they could possibly do legislatively, and that is at the summer food service rate. On normal years, and I put this here, the normal year, they're giving you about, and for breakfast another 25 cents, and they're giving you another 56 cents or so, 59 cents in lunches. And they're doing that because of supply chain issues, as well as the labor shortage. We're seeing that across the country, and so paying it. So and needing to do some packaged items still. We're trying to move away from packaging as quickly as possible. But the health department still's encouraging packaging because that's with COVID, that's one of their concerns. So all meals are free. These are some of the things they've done to market it. The household letters went out, websites, text messages, word of mouth posters, on the menus, we're telling kids it's free. So what we're doing, I already talked about this one on the food shortages in this country. So we're hoping, like I said, I don't want to brag about Sodexo, but I think you're really lucky because we have been able to really nail down some supply chain issues. They're just discontinuing at some school districts. We have not had them stop servicing, like Cisco canceled, just quit delivering to school districts in a lot of places, which doesn't help anybody, obviously. But what we've been able to do is use a lot of our other contracts from other divisions and actually get product into these houses where we've needed it. And we don't have any requirement on with the meal component, so it doesn't have to be CN labeled. In years past, everything has to have a child nutrition label, meaning it's been certified to meet the meat alternate and all those rules. This year they've lifted that, and so you can do a chicken nugget, and maybe the bread counting on the outside is not totally weighed out and totally measured, but you're still going to be able to serve it this year. So that's helped us with the supply chain. I think we've gone through this before in the past, but a complete meal for you guys for lunch is kids can take 3 of 5 components, and they must have a half a cup of fruit or vegetable with every single meal. That's a requirement right now. It's always been a requirement. And I'm going to go through the components here in a minute. This is kind of, some of these are USDA and some of these are Sodexo standards, but trans fat has been pretty much eliminated in the food source. You're not allowed in child nutrition to use trans fats. You're not allowed to have fried foods that go straight into a fryer, and that's USDA. All poultry and milk are hormone-free. And meals are 30% or less calories from fat, and less than 10% calories come from saturated fat, which would be your meat fats. And we try to maximize local produce and minimally processed foods. I know today all over the news is the onions. You'll be pleased to know, I don't know how many onions we buy in schools, but most of California, including most of your consuming, your stores, are using California USA onions right now because they happen to have been in season and they're there. They weren't from Mexico. So the problems are more in other states. But we didn't have any purchases of any product. And we have a Buy American requirement in child nutrition too. So very rarely do bananas are not ever from this country. Sometimes green onions, but most kids aren't big fans of green onions, so it's not that big of an issue for us. But we do have to do Buy American where possible. So, and pineapple. And kids do like pineapple, but it's not. There's no manufacturer of pineapple in the United States. Meat. So the first component of a meal is meat alternate. It's a protein source. We're hoping someday that they'll also lighten this up a bit so that it gets more into the soys and those things. Right now, it's a lot of soy to get to count for something. You have to give them like 5 ounces of a soy product to make meat alternate. These are set by the federal government, so we're hoping that'll eventually change. We use USDA government commodities. That's one of the ways they're hoping universal feeding will work for California, is to really maximize on commodities. So, which is interesting because not all communities like the government subsidy and those commodity products, but they're really hoping that USDA has made a lot of changes in those products. Like their canned fruit now is sweetened with juice. It's not, or stabilized with juice. It's not. They're not using any corn syrups and things like that. So that's good. We only purchase 100% pre-cooked meat products versus any raw is not cooked in your kitchens. It's kind of difficult, and there's a lot of foodborne illness concerns over raw being cooked in these facilities. All ground beef patties and any ground beef, there's 100% lean ground beef. We don't use any fillers like a soy product or any sort of extenders in product. All hot dogs and lunch meat are made from turkey and chicken. There's no added nitrates. There are some naturally occurring nitrates in all products, but there's no added nitrates in products, so they're 100% nitrate free there. We're using olive cheese is natural too, no added filler. Some cheeses in some places would have soy added. We don't buy any of that product, nor does USDA use that. Legumes are purchased pre-cooked in can or dry. The next component is bread. This is slightly different. Today you're allowed to use like white rice because they've relaxed those standards right now. They relaxed them just before COVID, and because there's huge participation issues, which sounds goofy here, but brown rice is not really accepted in a lot of communities, and so they are re-looking at it. But if nothing changes, next fall we'll go back to 100% whole grain bread. All pasta has to be whole grain, brown rice only, no white rice, and then all cereals are whole grain. But that industry really did a good job of switching in the cereal business. Fruits and vegetables, you're still buying a lot of local, not as, it's just the sources of getting it. 51% of your purchases have been within 250 miles of produce. And then another 9% are greater than that. I don't know how much is tracked during COVID during that time. And all canned fruit that we buy on behalf of your district is packed in juice. Milk is hormone-free and no high fructose corn syrup in the sugar. And then we're looking forward to doing a lot of promotions. They're starting back up. I think the kids, we got to get up, we got to get off this diving, jump and get back into doing some fun things for the kids, doing Future Chef. So we've scheduled some things. They're going to keep doing more. We know taste tests are really successful here. But our goal is to keep moving it, to get back to normalcy. So that's kind of the food service. On-site supervisor, that's kind of one of the goals we've put out on the table. But it's up to the district and where they go with it to do hands-on training, site observations. It's a lot of work to manage employees. You know, they need evaluations, they need all those things. And that's never been a part of our contract ever. It's not been allowed with California Ed Code for us to do any form of supervisory. We can work with the staff, we can train them, but when it actually comes to holding people accountable, that's the district's job. So that kind of runs through this year. Just real quickly, I'll mention next year is going to Universal. A couple of misunderstandings under Universal is we were hoping, keeping our fingers crossed, so if anybody can lobby for this, that there was a bill called, it was SB 364 that would have also put a local component and also put scratch cooking. It didn't pass. It didn't have the funding from the state for the state funding piece. But they went ahead and put in a meal mandate. We've always had a meal mandate that a free or reduced child would get 1 meal per day. What California's done is expanded the meal mandate to include all children, and they would get a free breakfast and a free lunch. It's obviously very expensive for the state of California. So the goal of this is it's going to be a nutritionally adequate meal, and the definition of that is it meets USDA. But it's not going to have anything with local, anything with those, because they also are seriously cutting the funding next year to pay for every child to get a meal in California. So in your district, I have a little slide that I put together. I estimate that your revenue will drop by $882,000 doing nothing, except the government is basically putting a lot of restrictions to the meal. But you will have to, by law, you're going to have to give a child, offer a child a free breakfast and a free lunch daily. So that's the big news for 22-23. And I think what's nice this year, we can see kind of what those numbers are going to look like because you've been totally free. So we can kind of get a little bit of a glimpse at how that's going to go.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's any members of the public who wish to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. Not seeing any? Okay, board, any questions or comments?
I had a question about that last number, the 882,000. Is that for if we were serving meals to the current number of students that we're serving now, or if we were serving every student?
It would be serving I'm assuming that some kids will never participate for the different reasons. So you're offering free meals today. So you have, over 50% of your kids, and that's growing. Like, for example, 303 kids at Cherry Chase ate today. 525. And 525 at SMS. So it's growing every day. People are getting used to always having a meal there. So you're right, it would be higher. You're 100% correct, it would grow because it's based on what you're serving today. Mm-hmm. But I think the silver lining is it's only October right now. There's a new set of legislators coming into play in January, and whether or not some of these are reintroduced and they look at that funding, because it's not only taking your funding back to just a regular national school lunch program, it's taking you down to basic breakfast is what they've put in writing to us. So you're going from a normal year, you would have got $2.25, you're gonna go down to $2 for a breakfast. Well, it's awfully hard to cover all your labor and food costs with $2, with the required component. So it's a lot, but I'm optimistic that there's a lot of voices in California. And so let's see what they say about this and how this all pans out. They have this monthly call, which if you ever want a link to listen to it, but they have a monthly call, and from the time of the one first and then the second one, they have decided to recollect free lunch applications. One of the goals of this was to not make kids feel intimidated with free lunch applications. But they have decided to go back to free lunch applications in all schools that are not CEP or Provision 2, which none of your schools qualify for either one of those provisions. And with that, you will have to collect applications. And the goal is, and then when the kids go through the system, they're going to have to use a POS system. And so that we can get as much federal funds, because you get a little bit of money for that paid meal, like 40 cents or something, and you get 40 cents less than the free reimbursement for the reduced. So instead, they're really going to push to try to maximize federal funds, which is good, because otherwise I don't know if this would financially work out. There's only right now $650 million in the budget in California to feed these kids. Now, hopefully there's a LA Unified, Fresno, Oakland, they're all under CEP. So they're almost 90% at least funded from that federal level, if not all. So it's more all of the other districts that don't quite fit those categories. So.
Before you go to, I just wanted to follow up. So I'm struggling, sorry, I'm just not understanding. Like, I get that we're gonna get less reimbursement, but but the state, I'm not quite understanding how we're gonna be spending more money than we are right now, or was that just not right now?
Oh, I don't think you'll spend more. I just think that I don't think you're gonna make $800,000 this year in money to cover your costs right now. And so then if you take out a revenue and you're having the same number of meals, the same employees, the same, and all of a sudden you have $800,000 less in revenue, it will impact the district's bottom line to the program. Now, hopefully one of the things even for Sodexo and looking at our fee structure, the more meals you serve, we have some fixed costs that will go down per meal. So there'll be some savings, but it's not really a lot. Your employees, if anything, the more meals you serve, you might need more hourly employees because they're doing more work. So I think we'll learn a lot, and we have this year to learn. It's just that you're gonna have the same expenses because food costs, there's nothing you can do. Same portions, the same meal pattern. It's just they're gonna pay you less for that. Now, there'll be a little bit of savings just because of this COVID right now and some of the supply chain. But today, Sodexo's eating the cost of the supply chain issues with inflation and 30% increases in some of the products. You know, milk went up to, I think, probably 15 cents a unit. Sodexo, you're in a fixed price, and we contractually guarantee that. So it's really Sodexo that's eating that cost right now too. So it isn't really being passed on to the school district there. So.
Are there other questions from the presentation or questions from packet review that you want to follow up on?
Nancy.
Nancy, did you have a question?
No, but I see there's a participant that does have a question.
Okay, the public comment time is over. We usually don't take public comment during non-public comment time.
Okay, so I had a question about the role of the supervisor. So I think it's a great idea, but I'm wondering, it seems like that person would be a district employee and that they would supervise it's in your presentation, but it would be a district employee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so would that person also be the person coordinating to work with, to check on whether or not the children who need a meal get one? Like, we have a couple of schools where it's been bumpy, right, with the free meals, and with the larger schools where they have one mealtime for a whole bunch of kids and like a few areas to get it from. And I'm wondering if there's other ways to make sure that at those places that those kids will get meals, especially the middle schools, honestly, or for school sites where kids can they'll just walk away and they won't, they won't go back because it's they'd rather hang out with their friends or it's too much of a hassle, they don't want to wait in that line. So you know, it just kind of tanks their afternoon if they don't have any food or energy, and their parents have said, hey, there's free lunch at school, go get it. And the kid's like, well, I'll just wait till I'm home, right? But then they were just out of juice during the day. So, like, is that person gonna be looking at systems, like delivery systems, of like how things go?
I think everybody should be looking at systems like that, and even scheduling the schedules in lunch times. I know, you know, how many kids is reasonable out of one lunch period and stuff like that. I think everybody has to look at that these days, because we've never been in this situation before where everybody got a free meal. So we do have to look at that. But I also think that a supervisor could look to make sure that there aren't things inherently, by supervising a staff member, making sure that child feels comfortable getting a meal, and making sure the lines are open on time. All those supervisory things that sometimes can prevent kids from coming through when they have to wait in line because it wasn't ready, and all those kind of things. A lot of the times that's personnel issues that they need to train the staff or whatever, or you know, make sure that they're following the procedures. But I think everybody now needs to be looking at how many kids a minute are going through, what the kids are doing. Do you add a point of sale and use some different areas? We're all in this together right now, I'd say, and it's all new territory for us. Last year you didn't have the kids on campus, you know, so you were really dependent on who chose to drive up. This year they're all here, so you know, now we're 6, 7 weeks into it, 8 weeks into it. Now we need to really look at those things. I think a lot of scheduling, you know, not even in a universal setting, you have, especially secondaries, that's a lot of kids to try to feed in a very short time everywhere. So, and high school, same thing. And you know, there they have the luxury, sometimes the high schools are open campus. So do the kids stay, or are they going to close it? You know, we don't know. So everybody should work together on that. And I think even try some things now. Even some more, like you said, the kids want to socialize. Maybe it's more finger food, grab and go, and they can just stand around and eat and visit. Because we do know that's a very social group, that age. It's very important for them too.
Yeah, and I think that during summer school, my observation was that the grab and go, like bag lunches, even when it wasn't anything they had to eat, the kids would just be eating out of the bag. But like just a sandwich and a piece of fruit or whatever, it seems now, like when I've been on the sites and I see the lunches, and even though they're not fried, they're baked to look like fried food. You know what I mean? Like it's things like chicken fingers and potatoes and a bag of goldfish and a milk, and I just look at that and I go, oh my God, it's like, you know, it doesn't look healthy to me. You know what I mean? And I've, you know, like, I mean, it's concerning to me.
And I think choices are good for that. You know, there's always, you can put out the stir fries and stuff. But I have to say, unfortunately, a lot of this happens because that's what kids are used to. I mean, unfortunately, your pizza, 180 more kids ate today when pizza was served. You know, so it's they push at that. But I also, you know, compared, if you look at the nutrient analysis, a lot of times casseroles have a lot of hidden stuff in them and a lot of carbs and things, whereas even the chicken nuggets, because they're oven baked, they really aren't, they aren't as bad nutritionally from fat, from calories, from everything like that. They actually are really not that bad for kids to eat. And the goal is they need to eat. You know, one of the things we know from a child, from children, for anybody, is it doesn't help us if we're not eating it. So that's the thing. But even a sack lunch, a grab and go or something, we'll try anything, anywhere, just to see how it works with the kids. And I think the focus groups, when you guys are working on the focus groups of kids and to see what they want, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would like them to eat healthier food than what's being served right now, honestly. I mean, and I know that I saw on the list that you provided that there were grapes and there were strawberries and there were all these like fantastic fruits and vegetables being served. And, you know, I've been by some of the campuses a lot and I see a lot of the oranges and apples, and maybe these things have all over the course of the year been offered. But I mean, on a consistent basis, like you know,
right. That makes sense. The thing about a strawberry or even a grape is it's more seasonal, you know, because it's just not affordable in the program. once you get into out of season, nor is it very good tasting. We all know that, you all love the strawberries when they're in season, but boy, once they start to go out of season, and we don't buy from other countries, as I mentioned earlier. So a lot of those products that come from Mexico and things, we're supposed to buy American in school lunch. So, and I think the quality is good, but definitely, yeah, when you put strawberries out there, kids love those things. And we try to do that as much as possible with them.
So Bridget, I think a later discussion, right, because to change, like, I don't disagree, like, I would love to see healthier meals, but that's a thing, I think when you're saying like goals, right, that would be us as a district deciding like, hey, we wanna change it, we're gonna spend more money, and then going to Sodexo and say, okay, like, this is what we want, and then they would change it, right, but like, so I think that maybe at a future time,
Absolutely.
that would need to be a discussion, like.
And I think we should also provide the actual analysis of the menu items, because, I realize, some of it's masked because we want to do kid-friendly items, but they really do meet from a fat and a calorie perspective. Right now, there's no cap on the top end of calories, but that is supposedly going to come back sometime. But there was all that when it happened years ago, kids were starving because they could only have like 500 calories or so. But I think that's really important. And then also to try different items, try a variety and do taste testing, which is one of the reasons we have Larry here too, is to work on that, to try some of the other items and see if a little bit of a twist of something can make it so the kids like it. And I think we need to expand choices. Remember, prior to COVID, you had a lot more choices. Because we were uncertain of how this is all going to work, we've been building back in choices. And then the kids can take it. Where we do know, most kids don't want to be told they have to have this and they can't have that, particularly in the middle school, high school age kids. They like to be able to pick pizza if they want pizza,
I think part of the I like the part about the events, which, as I heard in other places like Santa Clara, they do have a lot of educational events related with food and seasonal fruits and vegetables and all of these that make the kids, help the kids make better choices. And selling the foods that they might not choose, they, might prefer a potato over spring onion, but maybe there is a way to make it fascinating for them more. Or including more, like, I know that they do have that connection with the garden, which is actually in Sunnyvale, but it's part of their school district, that they do want to see how the vegetables are grown. And we do have a lot of vegetable gardens in our school, with some sort of a connection to help the kids make better choices without their moms looking at their shoulders to see if they have enough vegetables, that there is like that extra thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We do work with the Community Alliance of Family Farmers, and they're just starting their programs back up again too, because you just didn't have an audience for it. So we're working on that, but they're a really innovative group of the local farmers here, and they really do like to help out. And the A to Z salad bars have introduced, but I agree totally. And what's nice with choices is even if 20% of the kids try something new and different, that's really good,
I just have a question here. Is the focus like really to give every student a hot lunch? Is like a hot entree a big part of your planning?
No, it's just the lowest take rates are salads and sandwiches. You're lucky to get, if you, I could get the data, but it's usually from here. But we're talking when you do a salad, maybe 10 kids out of 300 will take the salad. So before with the paid, now remember when you were trying to get paid kids to come, you definitely would want to put things they want to buy. Because otherwise it doesn't help anybody if no one's buying lunch today. Because that's really, your staff is all paid for, everybody's there, and if people don't buy, and those are your lowest take. Now, there's a different philosophy when it's free. You could force them. Now, whether you'd have a lot of trash and a lot of food being thrown away and not eating it, I don't know, because now with it being a free meal, you have a little bit more say-so in kind of that meal. But I do know that sandwiches and salads are the lowest take rate. of the items. They do like the yogurt parfait. That one's really popular. They like that protein pack. Yeah, but they don't always like the salads and the sandwiches. It's always kind of just there. But remember, that was because it may be a parent who's buying a meal. Well, I'm only gonna buy a hot lunch. Why would I buy you a sandwich when you could take one from home? You know, I wonder if that's some of it too. But that's all gone today, you know, right now.
So I agree with Michelle that this is a separate topic for another time. But it's worth exploring and understanding the nuances of eating and cultural competencies around food. And how to build in more capacity for kids' choices. So thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Nancy. I just have a few kind of follow-up questions. So one, when you were showing the plate and you said 3 out of 5, like they only get to pick 3 of the 5?
They have to take 3.
Okay.
And one has to be a
Okay,
fruit
but
or
it's
a
not
vegetable.
like you only get to have 3 of them.
You can have all 5, and hopefully we get back to the unlimited offer, the
Yeah.
fruits and vegetables. We want to as soon as possible with that. It's also extremely labor intensive to have people putting stuff in bags. I mean, you guys just really were never staffed for that kind of repetitive things going on too.
Yeah.
So we're hoping, you know, the local health department is still encouraging stuff to be individually packaged on those. No self-serve. And so the question is, if you don't have a volunteer that can stand there and serve the child off the bar, you're kind of put into a corner there on that.
Yeah.
But at 3 of the 5, so you actually could take a fruit, vegetable, and a milk, and that's a reimbursable meal. You don't have to take the entree. Entrees typically have the bread and the protein.
Yeah.
But you could just take the fruit, vegetable, milk, but you are required, every plate has to have a fruit or a vegetable.
So that's the only right. So you could like do the not milk, you could do fruit, vegetable.
Yeah,
main
no
entree.
milk, you don't have to take milk, it's not required.
Yeah, okay.
It has to add up to 3, and then at breakfast, the only difference is it's 4, and you take 3, and you have to serve a fruit on that. And you can't do potatoes at breakfast until you've done another vegetable. So on Monday, you could do something else, and then you could do a potato product.
Okay, I just kind of wanted to, understand the 3 of 5, and then.
I didn't write any of this.
Yeah.
None of us did in this
You're
room.
following the rules, yes.
Yeah, well, because that could
There
disallow.
was lots of questions, and I realized like, oh, a lot of my frustration is actually with the federal rules.
Yeah, and you have to say breakfast is
healthier.
very carb driven under USDA regs.
Reed and I were like embarrassed about last time. It's not
Yeah.
your fault, but yes.
Yeah, I remember. I agree totally.
Yeah.
You can't just serve an egg. That is not a
Which is
breakfast.
like way healthier than the French toast. Anyway,
That's what we think, but according to the Institute of Pediatrics, that's who came up with these.
Yeah.
And remember all
I think
these
there was
things.
lobbies involved with it too.
Yes, I'm sure there's lots of politics
Yeah.
involved.
And then I have a couple of questions. So someone had asked about the unlimited, and I'd forgotten about that. So are we doing unlimited right now, or we're not?
I think you
doing
can come back and get as much as you want, but most kids
Okay.
are kind of, they're driven by schedules, like the educator side's over here, kids kind of get up and
And if
leave.
there's a line, they're not gonna want to spend in line. So I have 2 questions with that. Like I didn't, so right, my kids are now, I only have 2 in the district now, one's in high school, but because of the free meals. And it was funny as you were talking, like, they were making their meals part of the time, but then they discovered its way, because I've had my kids make their own meals for a long time.
Mhm.
And they discovered it's way easier. So even on the days they don't really love the lunch menu option, they're still like doing it. So I laughed. But because of that, I'm having more experience with it, right? So they are not aware. And I think most of the kids are not aware that they can come back and get fruits and vegetables. So I would love,
Let's put that in the menu then.
so yeah, so
That's
I
a
would
great
love,
idea.
like, to figure, like, how do we, I don't know how to advertise that better, but I would love to get that better advertised, so the kids are more aware of it. And then the other piece, I know it's not like a mandate from federal, but vegetables are way healthy, like, of all the things, unstarchy vegetables really should be happening in every meal. And so if we could try really hard to make sure there's always a vegetable, I know that there usually is, but there's not always, just because of.
Well, we need
And
to
it
know
could be
at
that maybe
school
it's out
because
so
they're
that all it goes
required.
through, but like still, so that would be an ask I have, is that let's always try to always have at least one vegetable, but
Yeah.
hopefully
We should,
a few vegetables.
We do
there's
like to
cucumbers
have
and
both,
carrots or
yeah.
something, you know?
and the one thing about with even USDA is some families want all fresh and some like maybe frozen corn or frozen peas or whatever. Those, we usually with an offering bar, you always have 2 vegetables at a minimum and 3 fruits out there for kids to pick from. But we should always have, if you don't have vegetables, we should see why there's no vegetables
Yeah.
that day.
So yeah, so that would be helpful, because I'm someone.
Because that's required.
I tell my kids, like, you have to have vegetable with every meal.
Yeah.
So sometimes they come home and there wasn't I mean, sometimes it was a vegetable they didn't like, they bring it home with them and they do another vegetable, but like.
And then
it's not a vegetable.
we have right now, it's called a rainbow, but then you also have to do dark leafy green. You have to do legumes once a week. And those
Yeah, I
things
know
within that vegetable requirement, so
Yeah.
that's good.
And then, okay, the vegetables,
What kind of vegetables for breakfast?
I mean, you could do like cucumbers, tomatoes, like peppers, cause yeah, that was one of my things, like, could we start offering it in the breakfast, right? And I know they won't pick it as often, but if there's options,
Yeah, I think breakfast is
time
pretty
they
much a
might-
grab and go type of thing, so yeah, but
Yeah.
you can certainly have those out. I was just curious.
yeah,
the
so
kids
those
eat.
are, yeah, cause like people are like vegetables for breakfast, but I started doing it more, my kids don't always love it, I don't make them at breakfast time, but I do it during my breakfast. And then my last one is just, and I know this has always been tricky, but just the schedule, like what the calendar says is not always the same as what is being.
Yeah,
I know
and
it's
that's-
tricky stuff, but just I wanted, like, well, whatever we can do to try to help with that. I think it's less of it, like, as a parent, when I was paying for the meals, it was much more frustrating that I paid for a meal that my kid then just threw away because they didn't like it. Now as a
Totally.
parent, it's less frustrating, but it's more just helpful, right?
I think one of the things we're working on for all the districts I work with is, and this is what CDE is recommending, because we can't trust all the suppliers right this second,
Yeah.
is to go to a weekly menu and publish it. Don't do a monthly, because you're setting yourself up for possible failure just because you may not have, and make sure when you do the weekly menu, everything's in-house for that next week. So, because otherwise,
One of those learning that you're talking about, one of those learning, I know it's.
Well,
tricky,
and I don't
know
think
it's
any-
tricky with-
you have to remember the entire United States went to every kid getting a free meal.
Yeah.
You couldn't guess this would happen to a supply chain issue when everybody had to pay before. You know, that's an issue when everybody in the entire country gets a free meal now. So it's just a matter of capacity. But-
Thank you for answering, well, yeah, you do, Ash, thank you for answering
Anyway, it's not free.
the questions and helping us understand, like, all.
Oh, and thank you for your ideas.
All the
they're
tricky
great.
stuff.
I just have one more question. You said that what was it? It was a take-home supper is being offered to students at the end of the day. Is that at every school?
It's where your supper program's at night.
We have it offered at every school, but not all schools have somebody to give it out at that day. We've asked office staff to help out and implementing to assist. So those are some of the.
That's an example of why we need help.
Yeah.
And then my last thought was that for those parent or family outreach meetings,
Mhm.
like will you be going to, like you said, you're gonna have a coffee with the principals type of meeting. Will you be also doing some of the meetings that like our multilingual families already have going,
I
like?
assume you go to those, that's a great idea.
We
They
just
should.
started right now with the coffee with the principal, but we could very well go to the.
And I know we have a very strong relationship with Second Harvest for Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, that I work directly with their leadership on things and try to look for areas and distribution points too, but individual school sites, absolutely. Because that's definitely a targeted community that's most in need too, so that really, that's good.
Yeah, that makes a great idea. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. And it sounds like we, maybe not like imminent, but we would want to maybe like in the next year, come back and have a discussion
Yeah.
maybe about our First Dose program, right? And if we want to change, if we.
Well, the other thing is also I'm highly encouraging that in January, so start with a menu advisory and see what the parents are asking for too, on the menus, because then you can always play with that, or even at least a couple times a year to validate what they want on the menus, what's their, and ideas, because, we all think we know, but unless we actually try it and pilot it, this is a really good year to pilot different things. So sooner than later, we should be piloting some of these items and just see what happens. That's why Jeff's here. Larry's here. Why Larry's here is to help out with that and to pilot some items and just do you like it or don't you? Just a simple smiley face, straight face or not, and put the marble in the fishbowl, whether it's liked or not. Would you eat it? Because now the question is not, would you buy it? It's would you eat it if it was there on the menu?
Yeah, and I think a board discussion at some point would be helpful. So I think in the past, our district's stated or unstated goal was to break even,
Yes.
right? And I think now, at least I'll tell you, my personal perspective is kind of what we're talking about here. We'd like to have predictability in the cost. That's like impossible right now. Everything's tumultuous. So we'd like to have that, but we'd also like to have volume. We want to feed as many kids as we possibly can, and nutrition, right? And so I think those are the three levers now, like a predictable cost, not necessarily break even, nutrition and volume. But like that's something that the board would need to discuss, and like each of those is a lever. So if you press one a little bit harder, the other one gets out of whack. So it's hard to find.
That's a very good way to put it, because I also included, you saw it in the back with that budgeted, what your neighbors are, like Santa Clara. They're currently budgeted to lose $1.3 million for this year. But they have a lot of nice things that they do for their community too. And it's a little bit bigger, so I don't know if you divided that by their 15,000 kids, what that would end up. But I think that's a perfect goal to look at, is especially everybody's got a lot of higher expectations than I think you're gonna get paid for, you know?
Yeah, that was a good summary, thanks.
Well, I just think that
When all the produce is on.
the biggest schools that only have one lunch hour, that would be our two middle schools, right? Because they only have one time for all those kids. And like, I think that's gotta be the big shocker right now.
Well, actually, CMS is not one of our biggest schools.
But
But
everyone's
they
out
did
at
it, they're all
lunch.
doing lunch at the same time, like
Right.
the elementary schools, they split it, so
Right.
even though it's not as big as SMS, it's
Right.
still a bigger group all at one time.
And that, just it's not unique to Sunnyvale. Most everywhere, including like a very large high schools in San Jose area, have one lunch period. It's just kind of the way scheduling works. But a few are adding some immediately because they've been kind of caught off guard here.
So it sounds like it's being worked on and we're getting there, we're getting
Yeah,
there.
and it's I think it's great from a child nutrition perspective, is that no one's gonna be singled out now and no one has to have the money. So I think that's real positive for everybody in this room.
Yeah.
Did we wanna go back to the one public comment or no? If
That
that's,
totally changes our protocol if we
Okay.
do that.
right, I was just asking.
So I think, right, if someone has a comment, there are other avenues to.
Okay, what could they do? Could you read
Yeah,
it
so-
into the mic?
Yeah, so if there's a comment that wants to be made or a question, you're welcome to email the board. Aaliyah, remind me the email. Meeting comments at scSD.org. Thank you.
That's easy. All right, thank you guys
Thank
for
you,
your time.
Martha, thank
And
you
your
team,
ideas.
appreciate it,
Thank you.
appreciate all that you do. All right. We are now on to 8, our review and discussion items. And our first one, 8A, is the discussion and review of the district's equity statement.
Yeah, I'll just start here and say that, remind the board that this is review and discussion. And so what Christina and Tasha are gonna do is go through a lot of the process, like enormous amount of process that we went through. And then there is a draft equity statement that's a revision. That's, again, this is review and discussion. So the board could come back at the end of this and say like, oh, that's perfect, let's approve that at the next meeting. Or you may say, we'd like to have another discussion time to, wordsmith it a little bit, or like, I don't know, that's really up to you. So I think that the community put a lot of work into this. And so we just want to catch you up to where we are, because we did promise the community a revision of the equity statement. So with that, who's next?
Yeah, so thank you, board. So at this time, Christine, with the team kind of dig in and try to present the feedback in a way that makes sense and also that inform the process. So at this time, Christina is going to share that process with you, and then from there we can answer questions, discuss, or follow up in the way that you would like us to. So at this time, Christina, take it away.
All right, good evening, board. I'll be reviewing everything that Mike and Tasha just outlined, but we'll be collecting the themes, collecting feedback, a summary of themes, and the proposed new statement. So as you know, in March of 2020, the school board created an equity statement. We just wanted to applaud the decision to memorialize the work and focus that our school district has undertaken to create positive outcomes for our students. And recognize that we've been continually focused on equitable outcomes for many years.
Systematic.
I think this is a user error.
It's frozen.
Thank goodness, I thought it was me.
There it goes.
Thanks. So following the creation of the original statement, the board asked various stakeholders to provide feedback on the equity statement for feedback into consideration. So stakeholders included teachers and staff from preschool to 8th grade at grade level or department meetings, school site council meetings and staff meetings. Family members provided feedback at school site council meetings and also parent meetings at the school sites. Our Lighthouse Blue team, with whom we work in partnership with around district communication, provided feedback. Our students via student leadership groups looked at our equity statement. And then collectively, multiple stakeholder groups provided feedback at the Equity Summit last May of 2021. I just wanted to highlight that our new equity coach, Nadia Razi, hired this school year, also provided feedback, helped consolidate stakeholder feedback, and also helped construct a proposed equity statement. That was great. From our stakeholders in various settings, we saw trends emerge that provide us important information on what our community saw as strengths of the original equity statement and also wonderings and questions. Stakeholders highlighted specific language from the original equity statement that resonated with them. There were phrases and themes that had multiple positive responses and reactions across the groups. Empowering all learners encompassed other positive feedback, including a focus on individual learners and an asset-based mindset. Learning without limits was a phrase that communicated to our community that all barriers should be removed and limitless opportunities would be available for students. Tailored education highlighted the importance of recognizing individual strengths and areas for growth. And lastly, feedback included overwhelming appreciation and value for the team and community approach to equity. Stakeholders also shared their wonderings and questions about the original equity statement when providing feedback. A wondering was around the origin of the equity statement and the process of collecting input from diverse stakeholders. And I do want to highlight that the process of collecting feedback over the past year was the vehicle by which diverse feedback was collected. It's also a good example of our design thinking model where we start designing where we are and then we work to make continual improvements. There was a wondering if the original equity statement may communicate or possibly be interpreted as an equality statement instead of equity. And last feedback included a request for action and a commitment on the part of a district. Questions arose such as like, what would happen after the equity statement is adopted and what would this look like in application? Stakeholders also provided suggestions on recommended changes. Again, there were themes that emerged from the feedback. This included a request to include stakeholders in the creation, which again was the feedback collected over the course of the year. Also explicitly mentioning that there have been historically marginalized groups in our history and that impacts may be disproportionate to those groups. To reframe language that may be interpreted as having a deficit mindset or bias, to outline a call to action, and to consider and call out structural and systemic barriers in our institution that may contribute to inequities for historically marginalized groups. You've heard me talk for a while. Could a board member or a cabinet member please read the original equity statement? You don't have to, I will also read it if you'd like.
It's good teaching practice.
But open the floor.
I do most of the talking, so someone else up here.
I think Isabel wants to read it.
Over there.
Yes, please.
Discovering together the individual needs that each student requires to thrive, working together to give more to those who need more when they need it, empowering all learners by providing a tailored education, support, access, and opportunities so they can reach their full unique potential.
Thank you so much, Isabel. So positive stakeholder feedback on language and themes, as well as wonderings and suggestions, were used to develop a proposed equity statement that maintained the highlights of the original statement, while also revising and adding based on the feedbacks and suggestions. In taking feedback from stakeholders, a goal was to create an equity statement that was broad enough to carry our district through years of equity work, with enough broad focus to meet the ever-changing needs of our community, while also maintaining focus on what's most important, and also being specific. Could I have someone else read the proposed equity statement, and then I'll walk through the language and provide more information and specifics.
I think someone on this half.
Maybe someone in this half.
I nominate Jeremy Nishihara.
Here we go. Proposed equity statement. In Sunnyvale School District, we believe that equity leads to learning without limits. We commit to working together with families, staff, students, and community to address the individual supports that each student requires in order to flourish. Mitigating structural barriers and biases that hinder students' abilities to thrive and creating a system where success is not determined by identity factors. Engaging in reflective practices, including two-way communication with all stakeholders, evaluation of resources allocations, and examination of policies and practice. Empowering all learners by recognizing the cultural assets that students and communities hold in order to provide a tailored education with supports, access, and opportunities so that they reach their full, unique potential.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. So in the opening sentence, we believe was added so that we're not defining equity, but rather articulating what equity means for us in Sunnyvale while maintaining the learning without limits that had overwhelming positive response from our stakeholders. We also added the we commit to reflect the request to action. For the first bullet, it was important to highlight and maintain the team community focus and also call out the various supports that each student needs requires to flourish. And the second bullet was added to reflect the structural and systemic barriers that exist for historically marginalized groups. It also calls attention to identity factors such as, but not limited to, race, gender, identity, economics, culture, without specifically naming identity factors. The reason being is that it provides enough range for us to encompass historically marginalized groups, while also providing space for inclusion and also the ability to be responsive to the ever-changing needs of our community. The third bullet was added to reflect what was previously implied in terms of reflective practices, using an equity lens to make policy and practice decisions, and also emphasize that we're committed to action. And the final bullet built upon the strengths of the original statement, which included empowering learners, asset-based mindsets, and tailored education. We added language that includes recognition of the cultural assets that students and communities bring, as well as naming supports, access, and opportunities as aspects of the tailored education that students need to reach their full unique potential. Full unique potential being another phrase that our stakeholders appreciated and valued. With that, that is the end of the encompassment of the stakeholder feedback, the themes that emerge, a proposed equity statement. Thank you, board, for your commitment to equity. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much. Before we get to board questions, if there's any member of the public who wishes to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. We'll give it just a moment longer. Aaliyah still not seeing any raised hands? Okay, thank you. All right, board, is there questions or comments?
So when we're gonna be reviewing this new subtle change on language is what we're proposing this year. That's what it is in general. And but we're gonna have the summit sometime in spring, and we're also gonna have more feedback with the community. That's also the idea of this year equity.
I don't think necessarily feedback on the statement, but more discussions about equity, like the actual work, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I like a lot the lyceum that we used to do a few years ago, and I went to a few of them because it actually brings all stakeholders from every school and all around the city, and we actually work on whatever issue was that year that we were focusing. In this year will be the equity summit. But in that way, we can see what is important to everybody and add it somehow to the mixture, and
That's what
No,
did.
no, so, the equity summit is what we're calling the lyceum.
oh,
So it's like a summit like on a mountain. So they're calling that's or a summit like you're meeting with people. So so the summit is now the lyceum, but it's not to work on the statement.
Well, it could be, but I mean, that's,
to work on equity.
Yes.
right. So the idea of, this is a little bit off track, but I think the clarification is important. So we changed the name from Lyceum to Equity Summit, and the reason for that was to make sure that there was an equity lens on our work, right? So we're just starting to plan for what that'll be. We're just about to pick a date in early February. So is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully it will be an in-person event, but.
That's the goal. We're picking out a location now.
Nancy, did you have a question or comment?
So part of it is process for me. I'm not ready to embrace this particular statement at this particular time, because I think we need to have a separate discussion about where are we at in our equity journey and what is it that resonates most with us, because it's a continual feedback loop. While I like some of the things that are in there, I want to reflect a little bit more and think broader about they want a call to action, and also think about is there more? You know, is this enough, or is this broad enough to cover our interests? And then reflect that into our equity policy. Are we aligned with that? Because I didn't hear from this particular conversation that there was any reflection into our equity policy. So I would like another time, perhaps in January, to look it over and move forward in thinking about taking it back, as Isabel said, to the bigger group and getting additional reflection. Because equity is a journey.
I have a thought.
Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
Okay, so in contrast, I agree that equity is a journey and that we should continually revisit this, just like you continually revisit a mission statement or other things. But I feel like this is great feedback. It sounds like there was a tremendous amount of work that went into getting stakeholder feedback, and I really appreciate how diplomatically you critiqued us. I will say it was like incredibly diplomatic, and I just really like appreciate it. Like, it's just, for me, it's just so much better because it says all the things that I wanted to say, but I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's more full, and I feel like it reflects a little bit more of the last year. So, I mean, I would say maybe we could approve this and approve the work that went on, and then agree to come back and revisit it. And I really see the call to action in here, saying an examination of policy and practice, and, you know, the two-way communication with stakeholders, all of that stuff. I feel like these are things that are very clear, and that maybe the first policy we look at is then we go look at our equity policy, you know? So I feel like, I I would move forward with it. And not to say that I wouldn't wanna look at it or that I wouldn't wanna come back and discuss it, but like it'd be nice to say that we, you know, I mean, it would be nice if we could agree on accepting the feedback. That's what I'm saying.
Jeff, do you wanna share your thing or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think my thoughts are in the line with Bridget's. I do want to just share, for the origin of this statement, if I could be remembering wrong, but I'm pretty sure that last lyceum that we had before it is where we did the work. So like each school, as a each table, each school was at a table, and each school created an equity statement, because I was like with the L table, like so each school created an equity statement, and then I think staff brought all those together to create the one that we had, and then we as a board tweaked it a bit. So I just wanted to share like that I think the first one didn't just appear out of nowhere, that it actually was not as in-depth of work that has gone on this last year, but it was a community process that we got to that one. So I just wanted to share that.
But I would say that part of the impetus for this came from the work that Bridget, I, and Dr. Picard did, being a part of the equity collaborative with CSBA. So it was intentional, and yes, we did gather more input, but it started from the board seeing a need.
Yeah, we went out to the community, yeah.
Correct.
So yeah, so I think it's fabulous. So yeah, I'm with Bridget, like I would love to like just say at our next, I think this is great, that we should approve it at our next one. And for me, like while our equity statement is really important, I think we did work, we got community input, and this is a document that represents our community. Is it perfect? No. Is there some people who might disagree with parts of it? I'm sure there are. But I would rather approve this and then move forward with our equity work, right? Yes, this is part of the equity work, but this is the statement to do the work. So my preference would be, let's approve the statement and then let's move forward with the work, right? So let's bring a policy, or let's like go back to, we were having those equity discussions, or let's bring someone in to work on our biases, or like so that would be where I would want us to spend our time, is on moving forward and doing the work that we kind of, it's good to talk about it, but we got to start doing it as a board, right? Like I know it's happening in the district, but as a board, So those are my thoughts on it.
It makes sense. We need to start moving forward, and there are a lot of work to do, and things that need to actually start happening. And it has evolved and it looks great.
Okay. So you feel that this statement is as broad as we need it to be?
I do.
Yeah, and if we need to revisit it, we will, but we can stand on this and move and keep going.
Jeff, did you have?
So, this is all. Okay, there you go. I mean, this is a working document, so,
Okay.
Even if we approve it now, we'll continue to talk about and revise, so, I mean, you know how I feel about wordsmithing anyway. I mean, all the stuff that we want to do is there. Let's just do it.
Yeah, Nancy, are you Phil? I know this is not what you wanted to do, but are you okay if this is what we do? But this is not, we will look back at it again, but we will bring it back for approval at our next meeting. And then in future, we'll kind of look at it.
So what I'd like to do in a future meeting is talk about the process and codify the process about how we're going to be doing about this circle, and make sure that not only this, but other things that we're getting community input in have the same kind of process, because that's also about equity work too. So I'm
I'm okay with this, but I'm also wanting to make sure that we codify some systems in here to make sure that we're addressing similar kinds of things in a similar type of practice, so that the original "where did this come from," the wonderings from the public, will be less mysterious.
So kind of documenting our process for
Correct.
how we come up with equity statement, how we come up with our mission and vision statements, that kind of idea?
Correct. Because that was the biggest thing, is they didn't know where it came from. And I feel like it's difficult to be engaged in the process if you don't understand the processes that are going on. And so this is an opportunity for us as a board to really clarify what our processes are to the public, so that it's a point of information that can be immediately distributed whenever a question is asked or wondered about. I think it has implications to a lot of things, so.
Yes, what I'm thinking perhaps what we could do is bring this back, not on consent, but instead on review and action. And in the description of the agenda item, we could go through the timeline and the process, because that will memorialize it, and we can pull that up, for example, at the equity summit and say, here's the process that we went through, community, or whenever we would do something like that for the community. And I think, Nancy, your point is well taken, that establishes a process for future work. And then I think we also might, this is a little bit of stretch for the agenda item, but perhaps the next time, go through like what are the next steps that we're taking, because Christina and Dr. Dean and Ms. Valentine, soon to be Dr. Valentine, are put together a really good plan, and they can summarize what the schools are doing this year. So does that sound like a good plan?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Others?
So you're saying next time we're going to get an update? When you bring it back, you will also be talking about like next steps beyond the equity
Yes.
statement? Okay, I love that idea.
It might not be
I love
a
it
full
so-
update if you're expecting a
No.
full update.
Oh.
Just like here's the goals for this year, here's the steps we're taking.
Yeah.
Like not a big old presentation on that, but
Super.
I think we need to do that for the community.
Yeah.
There's questions about that. Yeah. Okay.
That's great. Okay, does everyone feel good about this? Okay. All right. Thank you, board. Thank you, Christina and staff, and our community, right? Like lots of people went into putting this together. So thank you for all the work from everybody who's participated in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's great.
Okay, we are now on to 8B, discussion on English language learners.
Okay,
Mala.
yes, hello. So this is a discussion item that will help us.
And I just saw your shirt says equity on
There
it.
you go. In solidarity with
Perfect.
Right?
Sorry to rush you there.
Okay, this is a discussion item that will help us present meaningful information regarding both the needs as well as the programs and supports that we have in place to serve our multilingual students who have been identified as English learners. And the topics listed here they're not limited to those. This is just a suggested list. I would really, urge you to help us focus, because if we want to have depth of information, if we pick a few that we're really interested in, we can go deeper on them. I wanted to also remind you that in our LCAP, we have said this year, our focus is on newcomers and long-term English learners. Those are two really areas of focus. And as we know, when we focus, we can't focus on multiple things at once. We really want to go deeper. So those are two I wanted to point out. And also, as you heard, through our equity statement and the work we do, the one that talks, number 6, that talks about, not number 6, but there is one on culturally sustaining pedagogy, and that definitely supports the work on equity that we're doing. So we'd love to hear from you on topics that you feel would be really helpful, so we can prepare and present accordingly.
Thank you. Before board discusses, if there's any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. And not seeing any. All right, board. Thoughts?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm interested in learning about the students who, the long-term English learners who are socioeconomically disadvantaged. I think that is the group that I'm the most concerned about. And I don't know if we have long-term English learners that are not socioeconomically disadvantaged. I'd be interested in understanding that. I'm really concerned about the Spanish-speaking population, particularly the ones that in the reports that we dug down, that it basically said due to institutional racism or bias or other things that we've created, we've funneled them into special education, and that they definitely have a need. And I understand that we have a whole ESSER, a whole thing going for the TK, and we're gonna be working with that, but I'm very concerned about the kids who are in our system right now, where that's not the focus. So, I mean, it's the kids who are really at risk of falling through the cracks, and who are in those multilingual families, and maybe the families have a different understanding of like whether the school is taking care of them, or what's happening. And I'm really nervous about the ones that are still long-term English learners in middle school, getting ready to go to high school. Like, I'd like to understand what happens to them afterwards, and just like kind of give them some attention. I feel like it's our opportunity.
Can you repeat that last part, please, about the ones that are going into high school?
Well, the ones that are going into high school, I learned from going to Columbia Middle School that they've done some liaison work with Fremont High School, and that the students that we reclassify at the end, and with the family, everyone's so happy that they met that goal. They go into Fremont High School and they get bumped right back into a category that limits them in another way, and they're treated as English learners again. And so there's those kids, and then
So kind of the support from middle school to high school.
yeah, the support, like what does that trajectory look like? But then also I'm concerned about the ones that are completely checked out because they don't feel like school is for them, because they don't feel like they're good at it. So I'm happy with a lot of the work that we've done, like we've got every middle school student is gonna have an elective, I think that that's really wonderful. But I just, wanna make sure that they're supported before they leave us.
So the long-term ELs, and then with also specifically that transitioning and the support they're getting.
Well, yeah, and really just mostly the low-income English learners.
Yes. So what I'm hearing, I just want to paraphrase and see if I have understood correctly. So specific groups of English learners that are from low SES backgrounds, and maybe some data that compares how the potential Delta long-term English learners are doing as compared to the non-low SES group. That's one. And then really focusing on middle school students, because by then we know that they are long-term English learners, they've been identified officially. And then what are the supports in place to help them transition when they leave us to go into high school, and maybe what that connection and support looks like. So that.
Yeah, and why are they in our school system? Like, how many of them are in our school system, and they come in and they're born here, their families speak another language at home, and it's Spanish, or in some cases other languages, but predominantly in our district it's Spanish. And those are the kids that are the long-term English learners.
To figure out why are we not meeting their needs?
Yes.
Like, what are we missing?
Yes, I hear you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, is it curriculum, is it teaching methods, is it anti-racial, is it racist bias, like what is it?
Why do they not feel that they should work, or why are they not inviting themselves to the table? What is going on? And it's probably something that we can fix and we can work with.
Okay.
So Isabella, would your focus be the same, the long-term English learners with the low socioeconomic?
Definitely. I don't, as you say, there are cases that is really difficult to understand. A person that has never been out of the country, that was born over here and lived in the country as an American citizen or whatever, but lives in a country where everybody speaks English, and then yet it doesn't have the vocabulary to pass or reclassify as an English student. Why is this happening? Where are we failing? How can we let it happen, and how can we not let it happen anymore?
Yeah.
Yes, what are the supports that we're putting in place to ensure that they meet with success?
Yeah, and there is not one dimension problem, it's multi, but there might be many things that we can do.
Jeff and Nancy, do you have,
Yes.
is this the area you want to focus on? Do you have something different?
Jeff, do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Well, what I don't see here is family engagement. And that's a super huge component of this. I want to know, what are we doing to help the families support their students?
That's a good question. I like that. What are we doing to help the families support their students?
Okay,
That was good.
thank you, Nancy.
And to that extent, support for newcomer. So that is a linkage into other ones, support for newcomers and their newcomer families to understand what the expectations are. How are we making, and so the other one is, how are we making academic language transparent? To families and to the kids of understanding what is appropriate conversational and academic needs for them to be able to progress, and I don't know if this is the right place or not. What are we doing to support primary literacy of the families? So especially with our heritage language speakers.
So maybe family engagement and education as a combination.
Correct. Yeah, correct, because we want biliteracy. Where are we at on our biliteracy component with this? Are we ready to start to test out in any language, and how are we supporting that biliteracy component?
I think for me, the focus isn't just what we're doing, but it's what do we want to do next? Because I feel like we're doing so much. This year is an extraordinary year, and and I think it's really opened up a lot of windows into what's happening, and the disparity has gotten greater, we think. In terms of access, and it's just been a really rough year and a half. And we're gonna be in recovery for a while. So I don't think my expectation is not that it's gonna change is gonna happen overnight, but if we can just say this is our idea of where we should be going, that would be useful. I don't want anyone to feel well, we're doing this, and this, but that's not the question. It's what pieces are we missing?
And almost how are we going to troubleshoot? We got to, what ways are we going to troubleshoot this?
Right, and it's also maybe what we may have done with not as much intentionality. So how is it going to be more intentional and focused and targeted?
high
And then how are
impact.
we going to have fun?
I'm using my word, high impact.
Hindsight, so that we can have some accountability and see what the progress is. So we're not waiting for the end of the year to say, oops, this didn't happen. So I think that's part of the process.
Jeff, did you want to add anything?
I'm interested in long-term ELs as well. And, you know, I'm wondering if, this might be really detail oriented, but I've always been interested in longitudinal data, or the stories behind it, feeding into Fremont Union High School District as well. But we have a lot of data within our school. And if we start, maybe we can just, I think we've always been presented with material by schools. But if we start looking at our students, you know, because most of the long-term EL students I meet in high school are highly proficient verbally, but then we break down different components and we can really start seeing what our long-term EL students are deficient or where they just didn't quite meet the progression. And did the progression stop somewhere? Did they progress and then just stall out? And then where did that stall happen? And then we can start looking at curriculum. And I mean, I like the family engagement piece too, but I don't know if we've really, and I'm not saying we as a Sunnyvale, I mean, we have all this data sometimes, I never really see it presented, you know, educational wide, you know, and, you know, it's like, I've never seen like the state even like really dive deep into this. They have all the information of the long-term ELs and they don't go, oh, look at that literacy. That's really where they start stalling out here. We have a lot of EL students that start with us and they have a story, but we always end up just looking at where they score now. And I'm wondering if we can do that sort of that longitudinal data story among all the students, maybe even going back a couple of years. Students that have already progressed to Fremont and then looking at their stories and where that might actually end up giving some, you know, interesting ideas.
Yes, we definitely have a note of that. And when we share the data, we are already looking at trends. If we look at English learners, I don't want to give away too much, but just looking at how well they do in first and second grade and by third grade. You know, we see the discrepancies across our schools. So yes, it's that age-old bigs and calcs for those of us who are familiar with the interpersonal skills and then the academic language that Nancy spoke to.
All right, great. Do you feel like, did we
Yes.
give you too much stuff? Or is it, like, do we need to narrow down more?
Well, you
For
know,
a
things on the
discussion?
list that maybe we won't go as deeply into, as in details about maybe the curriculum and the country sustaining pedagogy, maybe we won't go as much depth, but we'll definitely talk about the data. Newcomer support will be quick and then long-term English learners, because we do both. We do potential, we identify them as potentially long-term, so we can do something before they become, and then what, you know, plans we have for long-term English learners. Christina, do you have any questions, because she's leading our English learners program as well, or is that helpful?
Was the focus area too broad? Do we need to narrow down? Or is that field narrow enough?
I don't know how to summarize that well. I think there are parts there that we'll lightly touch on, and then we'll go into more depth on the topics that surface from multiple board members.
Okay, that's
Thank
great.
you so much. Because I really feel like the long-term English learners, we help make them long-term English learners, you know, so that's really more on us, the newcomers. We can have a great program for them. You know what I mean? Like, and then, do you know what I'm saying? Like, they come to us and then we can develop a program for them. By the time they're long-term English learners, if they've really been with us since the beginning, like.
So that's our idea for us. I hear you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll just end with, I think the reminder, right, of, as we're like starting this like universal design, this idea, what is it, the action, like not being afraid of failure, but there's like phrase with it, isn't there? Remember? Okay. But just that reminder, right, like I think we as a board, like, don't want any staff, like you guys like do fabulous work and you are doing great things, but there are systems like before our time that have been put in place, right? So I think we don't want anyone to feel like you're not doing a good job, right? We just have to look at it in a different way. Like we have, I think, new tools and new insights to look at things differently. So I just hope that no one will feel like they're not, right, like everyone's doing a great job, we just need to look at it differently now, right, like,
Absolutely.
and yeah, we're supportive of,
And we take it in the
let's get
spirit.
creative, right?
You care about them as much as we do, and we appreciate the support, so we responded very positively, so thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are on to our last review and discussion item, 8C, discuss the district tree removal and replacement practice. And then I think I'm turning it over to Mike briefly and then.
Yes, I'll just say a couple words and then have Brent come up. So board, what I'd like you to consider is the possibility of developing a policy or at least a written process for when we look at tree removal and replacement. I'm really confident that our staff does a really good job of evaluating this, and the process that they have used in the past and will continue use in the future is consistent with best practices of other school districts and other municipalities, including our own in Sunnyvale. And I'm going to offer as an example the district office driveway replacement project that was recently completed that unfortunately there's some misinformation out there about what happened. So what we're going to do is Mr. Burns can come on up and just kind of go through a few slides on that, and then we can discuss the possibility of a written process that will provide more transparency in the future.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. Good evening, members of cabinet, and good evening, public. My name is Brent. I'll be presenting on the district office driveway replacement project. I would first like to go over the project timeline for this. Back in January, it was brought to our attention that the driveway on the north of our property here was in extreme disarray and disrepair, causing inefficiencies to the drop off and pickup for the Stratford school that uses that to drop their kids off in the morning. After we received that information, we had a site walk shortly thereafter with our consultants to review the site. The next 3 months were spent doing design development of the project, coming up with project scope. In April, we were able to perform our mandatory bid walk as well as successfully award our project to Garrett Construction Group. We started this project in June as consideration for the Stratford campus as to not impact their school schedule. We waited till the day after they were out for summer, and then made sure that this project was going to be completed prior to their return to campus. Now, during that initial site walk, the objective there with the consultant was to develop the objective of the project. And ultimately, at the conclusion of that sidewalk, our objective was to perform a capital improvement project in line with Measure G bond language that improved district property, as well as created a driveway that was bigger, safer, and more efficient drop-off area for the Stratford campus. Now, during development of the objectives, you have to look at the existing site conditions that are in place. The next slide will illustrate exactly what the site conditions were and how we developed the plan to replace that driveway. This first slide here, if you can see, is capturing the degradation of the asphalt there in the middle of the driveway. It also shows and illustrates how close the trees were in proximity to the existing driveway, as well as captured the overall health and well-being of the trees. On this next slide here, the picture on the left is of the isolated tree on the south side of the driveway. This picture illustrates the amount of upheaval created by the root system of that tree, leading to upheaval of both the curb and the asphalt there. The picture on the right shows all the cracks and previous repairs from all the past projects that were conducted on this driveway to try to bring it up to some semblance of usable. And again, capturing the close proximity of the redwood trees there on the right-hand side. This last picture is looking back westward to show you how integrated the trees were with the existing fence line. And I know it's difficult to tell in this picture, but the fence posts were actually elevated with the root system there on that last tree on the left. which led us to replacing that fence. All these pictures showing the health of the trees. Now, after review of existing conditions, we sit down and we develop our demolition plan on how we're going to accomplish the objective to replace this driveway. Here you'll see the entirety of the demolition, inclusive of the tree demolition on the north side of the driveway, the independent trees south of the driveway, replacement of all existing asphalt and curbs, as well as addressing the drainage issue caused by the poor quality of the asphalt by installation of a new storm drain. After demolition, here is the plan overview of what is currently existing out there. One of the characteristics of the previous driveway was that it was 20 feet wide, which is extremely narrow to have two passing cars go through. Adding on top the upheaval of curbs and asphalts created a much narrow roadway for cars to travel down, which is why there was that inefficiency and drop off. This widened the driveway to 24 feet wide across the entirety. And as you can see here, widening it would impact the root system on both the north side trees as well as the independent tree on the south side. I included these section cuts here on the right-hand side because when you remove a driveway, in order to get the best product out of it, you actually have to do an over excavation, which is a section cut there. We consult with our geological engineer who gives us this approved section to build to. In this case, it was 22 inches thick. So from existing grade, 22 inches down, we had to remove and then put back. And then I do want to touch on the trees removed in this project. So it's not our practice to remove trees without careful consideration and cause. And the trees we removed in this project totaled 10. There were 9 redwood trees, 3 that were dead, 3 that were declining in health, 2 small redwoods that were intertwined with the existing 6 others, and then 1 independent tree on the south side of the driveway that needed to be removed to widen the driveway. And we also removed 1 walnut tree at the far east of the property. That was removed because reviewing the property, that walnut tree overhung our neighbor's property, and so we removed it as a safety precaution. The neighbor was consulted and ultimately agreed with our proposition to remove it. There's no pushback from that. This is the Arborist Report that we had. We contracted with an arborist back in February to review the tree health, just to make sure that if in fact we went forward with this project, that the trees that would be impacting wouldn't allow them to survive. And then this is the project completion. Wider, smoother driveway, curbs and gutters, brand new on both sides, 20 brand new crepe myrtles lining both sides of the driveway, and new fencing throughout. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go public comment and then to, if there's no public comment in person, if there's any members of the public who wish to speak virtually, please use the raise hand feature now. Okay, I'm just gonna read our statement and then we can go ahead with that. Per our board bylaw 9323, the board shall not prohibit public criticism of its policies, procedures, programs, services, acts, or omissions. During public comment, we encourage speakers to discuss issues with civility, to treat people whose opinions differ from their own with respect, and to focus on ideas, policies, and values. And as a reminder, 3 minutes, and it's on there for you to see as well. And if you could state your name for the record, that would be helpful. All right, go ahead, Lee, I'll turn over to you.
So our speaker is Carol Weiss. Carol, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, your time will begin.
Thank you. This is Carol Weiss, a resident of Sunnyvale since 1976. I know a lot about tree issues in Sunnyvale as I've been on the Planning Commission for 6.5 years. Sunnyvale is a tree city. We take our trees very seriously, especially redwoods. They have a special place in our community. We have a Redwood Square Park in downtown Sunnyvale. I have a few questions about the process in which this was done. One of the reasons that were given was for safety, but in looking over the paper, I didn't notice any vision triangle studies. So that would show if indeed it was a safety issue and perhaps only one tree needed to be removed and other large trees put in. So my first question is about a vision triangle. My second one has to do with why concrete? Why not use permeable pavers? We're trying to use, save as much water as we can. Permeable pavers don't crack and they are much better for tree roots. I'm wondering if another driveway cut on either side of the campus was thought of so that this didn't have to be such an extensive job. I noticed that in the Arborist Report, he recommended the removal of 6 trees, not 9 redwoods, which were removed. Finally, these are all heritage trees, so I know you're not bound by city standards, but in the rest of Sunnyvale, when you take down a heritage tree with a permit, heritage tree is something 38 inches diameter from the ground, you have to replace it with usually 2 native, drought tolerant, and crepe myrtle is not even native to the United States. So I question the choice of what was planted. I question how the safety study was done. I question the way the whole driveway was designed. And I feel like this is very important considering the climate effects that we're witnessing. I think it's very important for our children. It's a generational gift we give them when we plant trees. It's not for us, it's for our children. So I think the school board needs to have a process that allows for community input and that allows for more informed process for your sake as well as everyone else's in this city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aaliyah, is there any more public comment?
That was the only hand that was raised.
I can comment, right?
Do you have a speaker card?
No.
So if you could fill out a speaker card.
Can I go ahead now?
Yeah, so if you want to come up and just a reminder, just a minute so we can get the timer set for you, 3 minutes.
Okay, the timer set.
I'll wait just a moment.
Okay, so there was Monterey pine trees, very tall, and they weren't mentioned. Some about a walnut tree, so I'd like to know about that. And you all saw all the evidence I presented, all the pictures of the before, and that one tall on the south side redwood tree. You could even see the curb was completely undisturbed. The roots didn't bother that at all. There was some buckling from an old driveway that could have been replaced with no problem. The Sunnyvale city goes to, you saw the lengths they go to. I've documented, I send all this out, and you guys are coming up with these excuses like, oh, couldn't avoid it, had to take it down. And you could have put the driveway on one side and kept that large, gorgeous tree that took probably 90 years to produce, but just blatantly wipe it out and then whitewash it with the superintendent saying, oh, there's a misunderstanding. We had to take those trees out for sure. That's bogus, and you know it. I showed you all the evidence to such, but you're just gonna whitewash it and say, okay, well, here's a done deal. We did the right thing. Next case. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. All right, public comment is closed now. Board, is there any questions or comments? Nancy, did you have a comment?
I appreciate the superintendent's recommendation to us about setting up a process moving forward.
Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I agree because I know we'll have other improvement projects and I think it will just, you know, make it very transparent and clear for people. So I appreciate the work that you've done and I understand, you know, it's confusing for me because there's references to the city process and there's references to our own process and they seem to mirror each other to a point, but it's just that we don't have anything documented, so I think it's great.
I think it'd be helpful to have it documented.
Yeah.
And I would just, so my added piece is, I think, right, like, I appreciate seeing, right, I appreciate that, but I do, so I think having one in the future, but I do just as we put other things on the back burner right now during COVID, I don't think this is a priority. We have students who have been out of school for a year and a half and have been struggling. And so while I would like to see this, I do also I don't want it to get in the way of the work we are doing for our students. So that would just be my piece is I think this would be great to work on, but I do not want it to be a priority at this point right now with everything going on with COVID and our students.
I think we should definitely have something written down, so the process, because these things happen all the time that we need to do projects and we have, you know, we need to move forward for safety reasons, for many reasons. And if we already have some guidelines, which are a lot of places to inspire and write down. I know that we need to comply with the district architect, so it's completely different process, but still we can write down and make sure that we do have, you know, a process to follow, which we can, you know, look at all the processes that are from the city, from the county, from the state, for the IBC, for whatever we take it, and move forward with that, and shouldn't be that extenuating for most. And I see that a lot of the work that was done and working with the specialists was already followed. Good standards to say mirroring from what the city does, but if we also have it written down, it will be clear for everybody.
Okay, so does that direction sound good, board, if we say move forward, but this, don't make it a priority?
I don't think it needs to take a ton of, I don't think it needs to take a ton of board time, I think, you know.
But I mean staff time, that's not, I'm talking about board, I'm talking about, our students to me are a priority right
I mean,
now.
I think we could get it done by the end of the school year. I mean, if that's reasonable to the board.
If we have some partners we can work with in order to get something adapted, you know, I like the idea of California native replacements and drought tolerant.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some partners that we can work with to develop something. In this school year sounds reasonable.
And we've already reached out to the city to learn about their process.
One thing I wanted to know is, I know there was a question about the driveway selection. You know, I mean, I know we're looking at high impact, you know, high traveled, and I know is that a consideration? Is that a consideration that would not necessarily work well with some of the speaker was suggesting, or is there something you want to respond to that about?
Yeah, actually, so that is a fire lane. So by code, we have to have a 4-inch section of asphalt over 12 inches of base rock. We couldn't use permeable pavers for that driveway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful to know, thank you. And then I just want to share, just go ahead, Nancy, do you have something?
Yes, I think that this could also be something that could be incorporated into our facilities master plan as an addendum. That would also keep it in the minds as we go to work on sites, that it's a clear place where the public's going to interface and it can follow, since that document is going to be there for a while as an additional place besides just our procedure manuals.
That's a good thought, yeah, that'll help show the process.
And I think, yeah, and I think that, that those plans will follow LEED, green points and all the standards. They do ask for, drought resistant planting and trees. So those big projects that we're gonna be doing will already be following those standards.
And Aaliyah, if you could get Ms. Weiss's contact information or have her contact you, I'd like to be able to respond to some of her questions and maybe have a more in-depth conversation with her, make sure that we can learn from her if she was on the planning commission, and also answer any questions that she had additionally. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Brant, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, board, I just want to do a check-in. Do we want to do a break now? Are we good? We only have a little bit left to go through, and then we can do the break before closed session. Does that work? If we plug through? Okay. Okay, so we will continue on with review and action. So 9A, approval of the elementary and secondary school emergency relief 3. Was there 2 other plans before it?
Yes.
Okay.
1 and 2.
I hadn't noticed the 3 before. 3 plan. Sorry for that.
Keeps going.
Mala.
Okay, all right. So the primary function of these funds is to address the impact of COVID-19, and addressing students' social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs is the core function. So even though there are different titles, and you just spoke to that because there are 1 and 2, the different titles to all these different funding sources, we look at it through a holistic need and a plan that's been set in motion using the core feedback that we got in a lot of detail from the site-based stakeholder forums that we had to develop the LCAP. And that's what we've used to channel all our plans on and all the funding sources to keep meeting those needs. And even though the mandate for this particular plan was that we were only required to use 20% of the allocation on direct student services, we've chosen to use 80%, thank you, Laurie, for that calculation, of the funds towards direct student services, because that has come across as the strongest recommendation from parents and school staff alike. So we're bringing this to you for approval, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. And not seeing any, board, is there a motion?
I move to approve the elementary and secondary school emergency relief 3 plan.
I'll second that.
Board, any discussion, questions, or comments?
I asked all mine in packet review and I got my answers and I'm comfortable, so. Yeah, I'm good.
Any others, we're good? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for all the work and the great things that we're doing with it.
Thank you so much.
Good job, team.
Okay, we are now on to item 10, the consent agenda items. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. And not seeing any, board, is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Board, any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. We are now on to item 11, the informational agenda. And it is the Williams Uniform Complaint Settlement Quarterly Report. Is there a comment on it? Or just there informationally?
Yes, before you is the quarterly report for information on the Williams Uniform Complaint Procedure for quarter July 1 through September 30th. We do have one complaint. I just want to call that out. This is the difference from our previous ones where it falls under textbooks and instructional materials. We are in the process of responding to that. It did come in literally days before the cutoff on September 30th, so we are in the process of complying with the timelines and response, so it is unresolved at this time because it is in progress.
Thank you. If there's any member wishes to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature now. All right, and then we're on to item 12, public comments on closed session items. So if any member wishes to speak on any closed session item, you can use the raise hand feature now.
Can I ask a question about the information one? Can I ask a question? So can you just tell me what the complaint, can you tell us what the complaint was, or like?
Yes, the complaint is in regards to insufficiency of materials for a child in one of our schools. And it comes in at a school where we have actually had the county office conduct a visit of every single classroom and check not only the textbook materials and devices, but also student access. So we are under investigation, as we are bound to do, to make sure there is, and we're very confident that there is no basis for the claim, but we will definitely do our due diligence and report as soon as we have closed the investigation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, we will convene to close session, and then when we come back, we will have one more review and action item. And we'll take a 5-minute, I mean, we're in closed session, but we'll take a 5-minute break before we go into closed session. Thank you, everyone, for those who will be here when we come back out. Thank you. And good night.
Usually we don't do anything.
Oh, yeah, well, that's why.
Thank you.
Because usually I just say this.
Yeah.
And I was like, well,
Whatever, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I do think last time I did say no. Not that I have to, but.
Normally you wouldn't even call them.
I guess. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you don't ask any?
No, it'd be like that's where like the ARs.
Okay.
You say.
Well, but like 4 of them are that, those 4 screens right there, right? Or that only needs 3 members? Remember to turn your mic.
Back on.
All right, we're reconvening to open session at 10:23. In closed session, we discussed consideration of student expulsion, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, and conference with labor negotiator. No actions were taken. We're now on to item 15A, the expulsion hearing. Are you saying anything, or are we just gonna make a motion? Just the motion, yeah.
You can ask if there's anybody that wants to
Public comment, yeah.
on the process. Right.
Yeah, so if there's any member of the public who wishes to comment on the process, please use the raise hand feature now. All right, board, is there a motion?
I move to accept the administrative panel's recommendation of a suspended expulsion for student A from the Sunnyvale School District.
I'll second that.
Board, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and with that, the motion passes. Thank you, Tasha and team, for all your work on that. We are now on to item 16, future agenda items. Then future meetings as well. Is there any future agenda items? Okay, and then our next meetings are Thursday, November 4th. We have our special meeting, that's the hearing for the trustee area maps at 6 p.m. And then following that is our regular board meeting at 7 p.m. It'll be here in the district office, with it also over Zoom. And if there's not anything else, I adjourn our meeting at 10:25.